Hey there, Iris. Winry says I shouldn't talk to you. She says you'll have a bunch of profilers and analysts picking up clues about my surroundings and my plans and my character based on things I say. She's right. I shouldn't talk to you. But, I don't know. It feels wrong to be this involved with someone I've never spoken to. Even after everything with Zachary, that still feels wrong. It feels wrong to hate someone this much when I've never met them. Truth is, I don't really understand. I just know I have an urge to talk to you. So let me tell you about my day, Iris. Let me tell you about who we killed, you and I. This is Spines. There's a lot about the last year or so that's been surprising. In the short time since I came into this world, I've found out about the Seekers and their plans for improving the human race. I've learned about the Splinter and their quest to speed up that process, regardless of the results. I found out that it's theoretically possible to awaken every hidden power in the human genome at the same time. I've seen terrifying and amazing things. I've fallen out of love with one person and into love with another. I've seen too many friends die. But nothing, absolutely nothing I've seen in my time on this planet is as surprising as the decision of some gifted people to work for the Splinter. The idea of gifteds working with people who kill and experiment on their own kind, all for the benefit of normals. Even knowing what they do, there are still gifted people who work for them, for you. That I don't understand. Or at least I didn't understand until I heard Zachary's story. But I won't get into that now. That's not my story to tell. It's his. He'll tell it at some point, but not now. Anyway, the fact that you've got gifted people working for you, Iris, that's a neat trick. And it's definitely made this fight a lot more difficult. And, by the way, Iris, I know you know what this fight is about. But for those listening at home and wondering what we've been doing, what we've been up to the last few months, here it is. Basically, Iris has her secret recipe to make mosaics, which is what she needs to make a trumpet. The trumpet is the person who's going to wake up everybody's abilities at the same time. A few months ago, I spent most of my time cleaning up the messes the Splinter made when they tried and failed to make mosaics. Now they have the information to make them in the right way. The problem, though, is that this new mosaic recipe calls for some pretty specific tiles. They can't just snatch any gifted person off the streets, the way they tried to do it before. They have to be selective. They have to be precise. They have a list. The good news is we have the same list they do, which means we have a pretty good sense of who they're going after. So the last few months has been all about trying to save tiles before the Splinter gets to them. We've saved some, and we've lost some. And even when we do save someone, you fuckers in the Splinter just move on to your next best option, the next name on the list. It never ends. A quick word about who I mean when I say we. There's the ones you know about, Iris. Me and Shan and Zachary and Winry. But there's more now, too. I'm not going to describe who they are, because that would give you too much information. But we've got a whole lot of gifted people on our side now. Ones we've saved, and ones who have come to us. Ones who just barely got away from you. Just in case you were getting cocky and thinking it was just the four of us against the entire Splinter. It's not, Iris. Way, way more people than me want to see you dead. But today, as it happens, it really was just the A-team, so I guess that's one of the reasons I feel like telling you about it. You know the setup, but for the rest of my dear listeners, Winry put together our list of the most likely candidates that you and the rest of the Splinter are going after. And right at the top of that list, this time around, was a singer named Erin Cho. The seeker files on her were a little vague, but it was pretty clear that her gift had something to do with mind control. Emotional manipulation. That's an essential component for any mosaic. I have it in the form of my ability to compel people. Shan can produce consciousness-altering chemicals. Zachary can make people bond with him like a baby bird imprinting on its mother. So we knew the Splinter was going to be going after someone like Erin Cho, and we had some other leads telling us she was the top choice. And so Shan and Zachary and I found ourselves in the nightclub where Erin was singing. We split up as soon as we got there. Shan and me to one end of the club, Zachary to the other. Winry kept in touch with all of us remotely through earpieces and little button cameras we carry into all of these things. That's how we always do things. Shan and me as a team, Zachary on his own. It's always like that. You know why, Iris. The club seemed pretty normal at first. Mostly college students, dancing and drinking and hanging out near the bar. It was a little grungy, smell of BO on the air. But it wasn't a complete dive. Erin's band wasn't playing yet, and the speakers blasted a bland series of EDM songs. As we moved, Shan ran their fingertips over the bar, the walls, even a few of the people. They winced as they did it, as their delicate ecosystem encountered hair gel and hand sanitizer and artificial perfume. But they kept it up, because if you had set a trap for us, Shan, of course, would have found it. They would have gotten a glimpse of the Splinter agents who were there in the past few days and hours and minutes. At least, that's what usually would have happened. Nothing, Shan said at last. Iris hasn't been here. At that moment, Erin's band appeared on stage. It was a band called The Ritual of the Rival Tribes. I didn't think much of that, but Winry piped up in my ear. That's one of the parts from Rite of Spring, she said. And then, when I didn't know what that meant, she followed up with, you know, the Stravinsky ballet, the one that caused a riot in 1913? Because, of course, Winry would carry around a little tidbit like that. I didn't think anything of the connection at the time, although in retrospect maybe it should have made me realize what was about to happen. Erin and her band started up. Their music was some kind of post-punk stuff, not really my thing. I planned on waiting until the performance was over, making sure she wasn't being watched by the Splinter, and then letting her know she was in danger. Most people we intercept end up going with us. Most, not all. But that's not what happened here. A few lines into the first song, Erin looked right at me. Recognition came over her face. She glared at me like I was the enemy. Then the pitch of her singing changed, and everything started to go to shit. Maybe you wonder what it was like when me and Zachary met face to face for the first time. We're programmed to love each other, after all, to fuck and reproduce and make your trumpet. So maybe you think the first time we saw each other in that shady little hotel room with Shan standing at my side, Winry still catatonic from your attack on the burrow. Maybe you think our eyes met and everything went slow motion and soft romantic music started to play in the background. It wasn't like that at all. It was like smelling food you used to love, but that made you sick once. Part of me was pulled toward him, but another part was repulsed by him at the same time. I could see on his face he felt the same way, that queasy push-pull. "Hello, Wren," he said. "It's good to finally meet you." His eyes darted back and forth between me and Shan. There was something in the way he looked at Shan. Recognition, devastation. Something I didn't understand at the time. I do now. But again, that part isn't mine to tell. Zachary looked the way I remembered. Bilal's dark curly hair, Jose's light brown skin, Lexi's eyes. His fingernails were still black. They aren't painted that way, I learned. They're just naturally that color. When he spoke, his voice wasn't what I expected. An accent he got from Natalie, I think. Traces of one of the languages in our makeup that I didn't get. Strange, isn't it? Thinking I didn't know what his voice sounded like before that moment. I hit him. I'm not proud of it, especially now that I know his story. But it was like my arm was possessed. Like all that weird, contradictory energy had to go somewhere. He just stood there as I hit him, without fighting back. Shan put their body between me and Zachary and pulled me away. "Stop it, Wren," they said. "Stop it. This isn't you." "I don't think she's just angry," Zachary said. "I feel it too. It's chemical." He was right. There was heat and aggression and something sexual too. A blend of feelings that didn't belong together. I scratched at my own arms, bit the skin of my hand. Zachary turned around and punched a wall. Shan held up a hand. "Go outside," they told Zachary. "Just go outside." Zachary left, and then Shan sat me down on the sagging hotel bed and told me what they wanted to do. I thought about it for a minute, but I finally nodded and gave them permission. Do it. Shan pulled out a few strands of my hair, and then went outside and got some from Zachary, too. They were out there for a while. I assume they had a conversation out there, but I've never asked either one of them about it. When Shan came back into the room, they held our combined strands of hair between their palms for a while. When they opened their hands, the hair was gone, absorbed into their flesh. Slowly, beads of dark liquid welled up on their fingertips. They smeared some of it on my forehead, went outside, and did the same to Zachary. When Zachary came back in, the feelings were gone. All of them. I remembered what I used to feel for him, but it was just that, a memory. There's a part of me that's still sad to lose that, but it's a pretty small part. Zachary, though, it hit him hard. I could see that. But we both knew it had to be done. Mosaics aren't meant to be out on their own in the world, you see. They aren't meant to lead separate lives and fall in love with other people the way I had. It warps the connection. Shan explained all of this to us. They'd suspected for a long time that the Mosaic connection depended on compatible pheromones. Chemicals in me and in Zachary just keyed to each other. Whatever Shan had done with our hair, whatever they'd given us, it canceled out that warped connection entirely. Zachary and I can be alone in a room now, and the only feelings we have are the ones that have come from fighting side by side for months. Like our shared hatred of you, Iris. But the memories are still there. It means that no matter what happens, being around each other makes Zachary and I both sad, remorseful. Gives us a feeling like we've lost something. And so, to avoid that, we mostly work apart. Me and Shan, Zachary and Winry. Tasks as far apart as we can manage. And that's why, in the crowd in that nightclub at Aaron Cho's concert, Zachary and I were on opposite ends of the room when everything turned to shit. That's why we weren't close enough to be much use to each other. Here's what I saw. Notice I'm not saying, here's what happened. 8 of the people in the crowd turned around to face me. And suddenly, whoever they had been before, those 8 people became my tiles. The 8 people were brutalized and tortured to create Zachary and I. Seeing that was weird on a couple of levels. For starters, I knew for sure some of them were dead. I knew some had taken on different, non-human forms. Yet here they all were, looking the way they had before they ever encountered the Splinter. They stared at me, and I could feel their hatred. Then they came at me, snarling like animals, and I screamed. Somewhere close by, I heard Shan scream too. But when I tried to see where they were, my tiles were on me, all around me, scratching and clawing and biting. One of them got an arm around my throat and pressed down on my windpipe. I reached back and I pulled the water out of them. That's one of the things I can do. Separate one kind of matter from another. The person around my neck shriveled to the ground, and when I looked down, I couldn't tell which one it had been. Because somehow, when I looked up again and tried to fight my way through the tiles, there were still 8 of them. One was dead, but there were still 8. I caught a smell on the air, a kind of piney odor that Shan gives off when they're making a defensive chemical. So Shan was still alive, I thought. Still alive and conscious enough to fight back. Knowing Shan was still standing gave me enough of a boost to start throwing punches. Kicking, trying to fight my way through the crowd of people boxing me in. Except I couldn't seem to land a punch. Like there was some gap between what I saw and what I could touch. At some point, I realized someone was shouting in my ear. Winry. "Wren, what's happening?" she asked. I jumped behind the bar, trying to put some distance between myself and these monsters who looked like my tiles. "Can't you fucking see my tiles?" I asked. "They're trying to kill me. What's happening to Shan?" Winry didn't answer my question. Instead, she said, "Wren, I don't see any of that. You're just flailing at people in the crowd. And they aren't doing anything to you." I asked Winry what the fuck she was talking about. Couldn't she see what was happening? And as I spoke, I realized I was much, much more afraid than I should have been. I mean, this was scary, sure. Any ghost encounter is scary. But I've seen so much worse than this. I shouldn't have been so terrified. Winry seemed to realize the same thing at the same time. "Hang on," she said through my earpiece. I imagined her sitting at her workstation, sliding around from one keyboard to another, her screens lighting up with information I can barely comprehend. "Just hang on, guys," she said. "I'm trying to figure this out." From across the room, I felt a blast of cold air. I thought I knew what that was. Zachary can do the same thing with energy that I can do with matter, pulling heat out of a body or pushing heat into it. When I leave a body on the ground, it looks like a mummy. When Zachary kills, it usually leaves them frozen solid, coated in frost and cooling the air all around. That made me realize something else. No one had noticed the mummified body I had left crumpled on the ground. The whole crowd should have been losing their shit, running for the doors, but they were ignoring it. "I got it," Winry shouted. "Infrasound. I think Aaron's producing infrasound. It must be directed infrasound too if it's only affecting you 3 like this and it's making everyone else oblivious." When I asked her what that meant, she told me infrasound was a frequency that caused paranoia, hallucinations, even psychosis. Later, when it was all over, she would explain that infrasound was usually only produced in very specific natural environments. Caves and old buildings that had the right shape, or the right acoustics. She explained that infrasound is one explanation for why people thought certain buildings were haunted. That some part of the house was shaped in such a way that it produced sound that interfered with people's thoughts and emotions. But something about that wasn't right. But somebody grabbed me around the neck, I said. I felt it. I didn't just see it. Winry couldn't have seen that through my button cam. Winry figured it out first. Shit. Everyone close your eyes. Wren, turn to your 3 o'clock. Shan, to your 11 o'clock. Zachary, to your 6 o'clock. Now hold still. That gives me almost a 360-degree view of the room. It was a little better, having my eyes closed, not having to look at my tiles. But I still felt the pressure of being watched. Still fought the panicked pounding of my heart with every word of Aaron's song. Okay, listen carefully, Winry said. There are guys moving through the crowd. 4 of them that I can see. They don't look like they're here for the music. I think they're here to take you down in the confusion. Winry, I said, if I try to defend myself without knowing where they are, I'll probably just kill a civilian. She said she knew that. She said I needed to trust her. I knew I could trust her. I knew. But that paranoia was starting to creep into my thoughts about Winry. Some small, hysterical corner of my mind started babbling. What if Winry was a traitor? What if she had led us into a trap? I did my best to squelch that part of my mind because I knew beyond any doubt that Winry was on my side. But it felt so real. All of you be ready to defend yourselves when and where I say, Winry said, and I forced myself to listen. Wren, coming up at your 2 o'clock, moving behind the bar, reaching for your arm. Now! I felt a hand on my arm, coming from the direction Winry had said. I turned to him and, eyes still closed, I said, leave the club and forget everything you know about us. I held my breath. My compulsion abilities are pretty strong, but if they knew enough about me to set this up, they might have come prepared with earplugs or something. But no, the guy dropped my arm and he moved away. I heard more orders from Winry, ones directed at Shan and Zachary. I said a silent prayer to a god I don't believe in that Shan would come through it unharmed. Then I waited and listened until Winry said, Shan's clear, Zachary's clear, Wren, one more incoming from the left. I got rid of that one just as easily as the first. I was just starting to think we were going to come through this without a whole lot of bloodshed. We just needed to get out the door and find a way to intercept Aaron another time. But then the first song ended and Aaron moved on to the second. And the second song wasn't so much music as a piercing, non-stop shriek. Aaron screamed and screamed and screamed into the microphone. And she did it somehow without ever having to pause, without ever having to draw breath. My own paranoia faded, and when I opened my eyes, my dead tiles were gone. My tiles were gone, but the crowd, the real crowd, was still there. They froze for a second, listening to Aaron, and then they turned on me. This time there was no question they were real. I felt their hands, their nails, their teeth. They yanked at my hair and tried to bite my skin. I screamed commands for them to stop, but Aaron's howl into the microphone was too loud for my compulsion gifts to work. I slowed time, but they were packed so tightly around me, gripping me so hard that there wasn't much I could do even then. Shan, Winry shouted. Anesthesia. Put them all to sleep, now. I caught just a glimpse of Shan through a gap in the crowd. Some of the people closest to them staggered and started to fall, but the effect didn't spread the way it should have. The crowd was just packed too tight for Shan's pollen to travel in the air currents the way it was supposed to. Shan pushed and fought and struggled, but blood already stained one of their sleeves, dripped from a cut on their neck. Part of the crowd on the other end of the room suddenly started floating up toward the ceiling. That was Zachary, manipulating the gravity in a 6-foot wide circle. "Wren," Winry said into my ear. "Incoming on Shan, guy with a knife." I saw what she was talking about right away. A big guy holding a switchblade, shoving people aside to get to Shan. Shan had their back turned, their arms held by others in the crowd. I didn't hesitate. I did what I'd been hoping I wouldn't have to do ever since the crowd went berserk. I ripped the water from a dozen people, Iris. I ended a dozen lives. You see, I can control the size of an area from which I separate matter. I can limit it to the size of one human body or an entire forest. But one thing I can't do is reach over a seething crowd of bodies and pull water from one specific person. I can't do it from that kind of distance. I could only include the man with the knife in the part of the crowd I decided to kill. Water sloshed over everyone's shoes, and a column of space opened between me and Shan. Zachary got himself free of the people who had been tearing at him. He climbed up onto the stage. And then he killed Erin Cho. She froze instantly, mid-song. Her body fell, and as soon as it hit the stage, it shattered into 1,000 pieces, as though she'd been dipped into a vat of liquid nitrogen. Most of the crowd ran for the doors then. The moment Erin died, the moment she stopped singing, the spell broke. They fled, along with whatever Splinter agents were still in the room. And then it was just the three of us, and the bodies. Shan looked at the row of dead civilians I'd had to kill to take out the Splinter assassin that had been reaching for them. They looked sad, and they shook their head. "I'm sorry you had to do that," they said. And it was just the right thing at that moment, because they didn't bother pretending I could have let them die, even if it meant taking out innocent people along the way. Shan took me in their arms, and I let myself stay like that for just a minute. That's about as much time as we ever get. A minute here, another minute there. There was nothing to say. Our mission was a failure. To the people who survived that club, to Erin Cho's band, Zachary and Shan and I are the villains of this story. We're the ones who came in and killed people for no clear reason and then vanished without a trace. So, congratulations, Iris, for turning us into the bad guys here. It'll make recruiting the next Erin that much easier. But you and I, we know the truth. We know who made that massacre happen. We know how much blood is on your hands. I'm coming for you, Iris. And every innocent person who gets caught in the middle, every assassin you send after Shan, it just makes me that much more determined to reach into your chest and rip your heart out. See you soon, Iris. Sooner or later, I'll catch up. Until next time, sleep tight. Spines is a production of Zoom Doom Stories. It's narrated by Wren Jones, written by Jamie Killen, website and logos by Benjamin Pond, produced by Jamie Killen and Benjamin Pond. You can support Spines by visiting patreon.com/Spines Podcast and by subscribing and leaving a review on iTunes. Spines is a member of Fatecrafters Studios. Find more great shows at fatecrafters.com. This week we recommend Theater of Tomorrow. Theater of Tomorrow is an anthology science fiction audio drama. A sentient ship stole the night. A private eye chases corruption on the moon. An interview with a man from the afterlife. Anything you can imagine is on stage at Theater of Tomorrow. Science, horror, and mystery for your ears.